a suburb of Montreal, Quebec, a cunning and perverted criminal uses water to destroy every trace of his crime. For months, investigators try to focus an enormous number of leads. May 2002. Jessica Grimard did not come home last night. Her parents are distressed that their 14-year-old daughter has not even called. Her father hopes that Jessica spent the night at a friend's. He calls to try and track her down, but no one knows where she is.
At the same time, he had a kind of premonition that his daughter was near the water. Not far from where the family lives, in Rivière des Prairies, there's a stream. The father decided to walk to the stream to see if there were any signs of his daughter there.
Jessica's father searches a park across the street from their home. The stream is swollen by the spring rains.
In his mind, the father could see the water and his daughter close to the water. But you don't just think, okay, I'm gonna solve a crime.
Within minutes, Jessica's father finds a shoe, then the horrifying discovery of his daughter, lifeless. Detective Sergeant Joanne Barabé is with the Montreal Police Major Crimes Unit. She's the lead investigator.
I knew that she had been stabbed and her throat cut, and that the father had discovered his daughter's body.
Forensic technician France Gignac will assist Barabé to gather evidence from the scene.
What I remember from the day is that it was raining heavily as I headed to the scene. I knew the scene was outdoors, and I was thinking, oh my God, what will this scene be like?
They know the water will seriously complicate the investigation. Recent rain may have erased footprints, washed away bloodstains, and destroyed DNA evidence. Investigators start at the outside of the scene and work their way in toward the victim. The first thing they need to determine is the entry point.
It's an outdoor scene, which is more difficult. It's harder to tell where they came from. There are no entrance or exit doors. They could have come from anywhere. So we spent time looking at any openings we could see into the forest.
The next step for Joanne Barabé and France Gignac is to approach the victim, concentrating on what they can find all around her.
As I was crossing the forest, I saw the victim in the stream. I had a flash. I felt a sudden flush of horror, and I had to talk myself through it, to create an emotional barrier, because you can't let your emotions get the better of you. So I put my feelings totally to one side.
Gignac gathers evidence around the stream. What could the water be hiding, and what has it washed away? After a detailed examination of the crime scene, they turn their attention to the victim.
We went into the water to examine the victim, but without touching her, just going over her visually to look for anything noteworthy.
They confirm that the victim's throat has been cut.
All her blood had drained out of her. She was white, and the wound was very apparent. There were several cuts through to the spinal column, so it was very apparent. There wasn't much blood near the victim's body. She was in the water, so the waves were gently lapping her. It was as if the victim had been given a thorough wash. She was in the water, and the water was doing its job.
While examining her clothing, they make a strange discovery.
The thing that was bothering me was that the victim had the leaf from a tree under her third sweater. But she was dressed when she was in the stream. So how did the leaf get there?
Joanne Berube suspects the victim was undressed and then her clothes were put back on.
There is the possibility of a sexual assault, which for now I can neither confirm nor rule out. But at the moment, the only clue I have is the leaf. And that leads me to believe that something might have happened.
She's in the water, but did she die in the water? Could it have happened out of the water? That was the other thing we wanted to know.
The procedure for gathering evidence on land is straightforward. But for evidence found in the water, the rules are different.
Sur cette scène-là, je sais qu'elle a les mains dans l'eau. Donc avant que le médecin...
At this scene, I knew the victim had her hands in the water. So before the coroner moved her, I decided to put plastic bags on her hands to protect them, in case there were things in her hands or under her nails.
Ou sous les ongles.
The investigators find bloodstains on branches and leaves. This indicates that the attack must have started on land. But what happened after that? Was there a struggle? Did she try to run and fall into the stream? Or did the perpetrator drag her there to wash away the evidence? Detective Sergeant Gilles Lafrance from the Major Crimes Unit interviews Jessica's father.
You can't fully enter into the grieving process right away because you have to provide information. You've just lost a loved one, a child, a sister, but for now you have to focus on remembering things. Who are her friends? Where was she going last night? What time was she supposed to come home? And who was she with?
Lafrance learns that Jessica's grandmother lives nearby. She saw a beige car parked on the street and a strange man got out and walked away. When she looked out before going to bed, the car was gone. Berube and Gignac have not found a weapon, a footprint, or a fiber that will lead them to a possible murderer. They'll continue their investigation the next day. Mario Arbor of the emergency response team is called in to assist. The investigators ask him to search the stream for a murder weapon.
We explained to them exactly what kind of equipment we had, including a metal detector. They wanted to know whether we could use it to look for metal in the water as well as on dry land. And it can be used in the water.
He is aware that the investigators have high hopes that his search will lead them to a murder weapon. He also knows that searching in water presents special problems.
If we start moving our hands around in the water with all the leaves and rocks, and we accidentally touch the tool or weapon, it can be devastating for the investigation.
Joanne Berube and France Gignac begin to uncover some fresh evidence.
Some blood had collected under the leaves, and because they were so wet, it hadn't had time to dry out.
Berube believes this is where the victim's throat was cut. Mario Arbor arrives at the stream and begins to look for a murder weapon.
What could the person responsible for this crime have done afterwards? Could they have been nervous and run away immediately, leaving the knife at the scene? Or did they take the time to clean it, hold it tightly, and keep it on them? Or did they just go and hide it somewhere nearby? in the water, on the shore, or in the bush? Or after committing the crime, did they throw it as far away as they could? It's as if you're trying to get into the killer's head. You're trying to figure out what he might have been thinking, how he might have reacted. If I were him, what would I do with the stream here?
The investigation requires patience and attention to detail.
Working in the water is different from working on land, because when you look in the water, the image is refracted. And if you put your hand in the water, it creates ripples, so you could lose sight of whatever you thought was there.
Gignac and Berube continue to make progress.
We also discovered a second earring that was deeper among the leaves. Had it been torn out by the suspect? Can we find DNA from the suspect on it? That's the important thing for an investigator.
Each new discovery raises new questions.
Sur la scène, on peut présumer qui?
At the scene, you can assume anything. It's a man, it's a woman. Here we have a 14-year-old girl who has been found dead. Was it jealousy? It could be a man or a woman. All these things were going through our minds.
After several hours, Mario Arbor has to admit defeat.
We found nothing at all that we could say must have belonged to the suspect. That made us think that the person must not have been nervous and must have been aware of what they were doing, and that they may have carefully kept the murder weapon with them.
After 2 days, there is still no evidence leading them to a murderer. Joanne Berube reviews the autopsy results with Gilles Lafrance.
La victime a 25 plaies, dont 9 plaies de défense.
The victim has 25 wounds, including 9 defense wounds. She has been stabbed on the body, and her throat has been cut very deeply, with extreme violence. The wounds are very deep. I asked him whether she'd been sexually assaulted, but the pathologist had told me that there was no evidence of sexual assault.
Berube can't stop thinking about the leaf she found on Jessica's body. She calls the medical examiner to tell him about her suspicions. Since there is no trace of semen, the coroner cannot confirm nor rule out the possibility of rape. France Gignac prepares all the exhibits to send to the forensic lab. She hopes that the scientists will be able to find traces of DNA and that the water hasn't contaminated the samples. The community is in shock. Nearly 1,000 people attend Jessica's funeral to express their sympathy to the family and friends. Others hold a quiet vigil in the forest. Somewhere in town, the murderer is hiding. The investigators continue their work in the neighborhood. They've received more than 30 leads. Each one has to be thoroughly explored. Joanne Berube wants to know everything about Jessica. She interviews the family, neighbors, friends, schoolmates and teachers, everyone in her social circle.
Alors, plusieurs pistes en même temps.
We were considering a number of possibilities. Should we be looking at her friends? Could it be a revenge after some kind of quarrel? Was it a love triangle? Even young people can react differently sometimes.
The investigators learn that Jessica was a good student. She got along well with all the kids at school. She was always willing to help them. She was starting to get interested in boys, but she wasn't known to have a boyfriend. No one seemed to be jealous of her or want to get revenge. She was always with her parents, sisters, or friends. She never went anywhere alone. There was nothing suspicious about Jessica.
J'apprends sur la jeune fille qui n'a absolument
What I learned about the girl was that there was nothing at all that could move the investigation forward. Nothing that could explain how she came to be where she was found. Nothing that could help us. No clues. Absolutely nothing.
The investigators widened their search.
Parce que aux alentours
In the area where she was found, there are 3 centers where there are people who have been released, either from prison, from a detention center, or from an institution.
Barrow Bay checks all the individuals released from custody during the months preceding the crime and finds no one. She also checks all the incident reports involving a beige vehicle during the week of the crime, and once again, nothing. All the forensic reports have been returned, and no leads are produced.
Malheureusement, sur la scène,
Unfortunately, no DNA was found on the scene, and the victim didn't have any traces of DNA on her. No detail had been left.
Aucun détail n'avait été laissé.
When we were at the scene, we were thinking, it's either someone close to her who really had it in for her, or we are dealing with a murderer who was obviously killed before.
And
And if we're looking for a serial killer, we really, really want to find that person. Because if this isn't their first murder, it won't be their last either.
Parce que si c'est pas son premier, c'est pas son dernier non plus.
5 months pass and the police have hit a dead end. They have no DNA, no fingerprints, no motive. They've run out of leads. It takes a remarkable series of events for the investigators to discover a connection, one that will bring them into contact with the diabolical criminal.